Good evening, and once again, welcome to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And tonight, we're talking movies again because comic books haven't finished up for the month of July yet, and that's when we said that we were going to start talking about them again in my comic book segment, so you just have to wait a little bit longer, probably next week or at latest the week after. But here we're talking about the next big summer genre film to hit the screen, and that, of course, is James Mangold's The Wolverine. Of course, Hugh Jackman returning to the role that made him a huge star, and it's so odd to think of, this is a man that was kind of pulled out of the obscurity of Australian musical theater to become, basically the star of a huge franchise and star of his own, and now two, standalone movies. Now, this is, again, directed by James Mangold, who has done some great films in his career. Did Copland with Stallone and De Niro and Ray Liotta and Harvey Keitel and Peter Berg and Michael. I mean, everybody. It was a great film. Loved it. And then more recently did the remake of 3:10 to Yuma with Russell Crowe and Christian Bale, which I really enjoyed. Thought it was a really solid remake. And then kind of headed towards more towards oblivion with his with the kind of bomb of the Tom Cruise Cameron Diaz action comedy, in quotes, because it's neither really good on action or really good on comedy, film Night and Day. But this is kind of his redemption piece, if you will. And basically what we have here is a film full, essentially full of, of largely Japanese casts, and not many, certainly not any American name, not names that are known to a lot of people in the U.S., but are nonetheless some really terrific performances. Now, the film, basically, it is based on the work that is contained within these pages, which is the pages of the 4-issue miniseries that Chris Claremont and Frank Miller did back in 1982, simply called Wolverine. Now, the film's opening sequence actually takes place in 1945, and Logan is a prisoner of war. It's a POW who is being held at a POW camp in Nagasaki. And lo and behold, the moment that we open is pretty much within minutes. I believe this is the Little Boy bomb of the Fat Man and Little Boy pair of A-bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively, and he saves the life of essentially a kind POW camp guard named Yashida. And then we spring forward. We see basically Yashida's reaction to Logan, kind of regrowing all of his flesh and everything like that after a nuke has just, gone over their heads. And, then we snap to the present, and in the present he, Logan is, he's very unkempt. He's got long hair. He's unshaven. He's kind of, subsisting on, Canadian whiskey and just and guilt. He is racked with guilt from the ending of X-Men: The Last Stand, in which he had to kill Jean Grey. Now, fortunately, this is one thing I need to say. This is a standalone film. This really is, it's not a sequel to either X-Men Origins Wolverine, thank God, and it's not really a sequel to X3. But it definitely, if there is anything that this film touches on as far as event-wise in Logan's life, it is the events of the final events of X3. And so he's actually, and the beginning of the film, once it gets to where he's living kind of hobo-ish in in Canada, he ends up having to do basically the same thing that he does in the comic, which is he has to kill a bear that has been poisoned with an illegal poison by some hunters, but he is also sworn off. Basically, he's taken a solemn vow, if you will, of not doing violence anymore, even though violence is basically at the very core of who Wolverine is. So he goes to the bar to confront the hunters that shot the bear that he had to, of course, put down. It's a much different opening. It's a much more sorrowful opening than what we had in the comic, which is where he's kind of happy to be hunting the bear. He's not happy that he has to kill it, but he's just happy to be hunting it, but killing is what he does. And that's kind of what the comic is about, and a little bit what turns out here. Anyway, he goes to the bar to confront the hunter, and he is then also met, or kind of not really met by, but someone comes looking for him, and it is this woman, Yukio, who is played by Rila Fukushima, and she's very kind of punky, almost pixie-ish. She has this dyed red hair and like these kind of prison bar leggings on and everything like that, and she is Helen Jesus with a katana. The reason that she has been sent for, or that's the reason that she's come there to find Logan, is that Yoshida is dying, and she wants to bring him to Yoshida in Japan to basically say goodbye. Now, once there, Logan cleans up a little bit in a very funny scene, and he is then, he is met by Yashida, who's played by Hal Yamanouchi, or Haruiko Yamanouchi, and he's an old man now, of course, and he is the wealthiest man in all of Asia, it seems. Or at least the wealthiest man in Japan. He has, he's amassed a great fortune. He's a king of industry there, and he basically offers Logan something, which is that he wants to kind of almost trade places with Logan, if you will. Now that he's dying, he sees that, he wants, he's afraid of death, and he believes that Logan wants death, and because of how long he's lived. And so he's basically willing, he says, I can offer you mortality. And Wolverine kind of balks at that, but there's another entity there, which is a character named Viper, who poisons Logan, and then but this is actually, again, there's all this other stuff going on. Other than meeting Yukio, he also meets Mariko Yoshida, who is played by Tao Okamoto. And of course, this beautiful flower of a thing, and he's immediately drawn to her, and even seems to save her from potentially hurling herself off of the cliff that their home is on and into the ocean. And her father, Shingen, who is played by Hiroyuki Sanada, who we know from the comic, is just, he's a pretty nasty dude. And he also meets Harada, who's played by Will Yun Lee, who we have seen in some American films, not many, but some. And Viper is played by Svetlana Kolchenkova. Svetlana Kolchenkova. Originally was slated to be played by Jessica Biel, but was played by her instead. And whatever. Basically, after being poisoned by Viper, Logan discovers, as Yakuza thugs attempt to kidnap Mariko, that he has lost a great deal of his ability to heal. And so he is becoming more vulnerable. And as the story goes, the more vulnerable one is, the more dangerous one can be. So he basically hides out with Mariko as he, after saving her, and takes her to a place that she knows that no one ever looked for her. There's many reasons why people are after her, and none of which I'm going to get into here. But during the course of this, Logan and Mariko fall in love. And then, unfortunately, Mariko is taken again. And, we have the machinations of Shingen, we have the machinations of potentially the machinations of Harada, who seems to be kind of a good guy, if you will. And then we have the assistance of Yukio, as they all essentially kind of form into a line where Logan kind of embraces his nature once again as a badass killer and goes to save Mariko. And that's basically what this film is about. It's a strange kind of action love story. And here's the thing. It's pretty goddamn good. I was scared when this film received a PG-13 rating, because from day one, even after Darren Aronofsky was originally supposed to be the director of this film, and Christopher McQuarrie was writing the script. Now, Darren Aronofsky, of course, has had several abortive attempts to get a genre film off the ground. Obviously, Aronofsky doing, coming from films like Pi and Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan. But he tried. He was the first director to try and reboot it was the first director named anyway to try and reboot the failing Batman franchise after the mess of everything that happened there back in, I think, 2002 or something like that, before Christopher Nolan was eventually given that job. He also tried to do he wanted to direct RoboCop, but that fell through. He also wanted to do this film, but ultimately he left because he knew he was going to be spending a lot of time in Japan and didn't want to spend that much time away from his family. Apparently he just had a new baby, whatever. But to me, that read creative differences. Whenever anybody leaves a film, to me it always is a warning sign that, okay, creative differences, because the film is bad. And Christopher McQuarrie's script was later rewritten. Christopher McQuarrie, this is a guy who won the Oscar for writing the script for Usual Suspects, most recently wrote and directed Jack Reacher, which is a fine film. But and this film was rewritten by Mark Bomback and Scott Frank. Now, Mark Bomback is someone who I had heard of, but he doesn't have a very impressive resume, but Scott Frank absolutely does. Scott Frank, he's written films like one of the greatest murder mysteries I've ever seen, which is Kenneth Branagh is Dead Again. He also wrote Minority Report. He wrote that adaptation. He wrote Out of Sight, one of the greatest films of the 90s. And wrote and directed the film The Lookout with Joseph Gordon-Levitt back in 2007. Very, very good film. So this is a really good quality screenwriter here. I don't think he's won any awards, but he's done a lot of really awesome films. So with his name attached to this, that relented some credibility, but the fact that it was rated PG-13 when everybody said this is going to be dark, it's going to be violent, it's going to be bloody and savage, and of course Fox, this is a Fox film, this is what Fox is famous for. Fox is famous for taking what should be probably a hard R film like Aliens vs. Predator or Live Free or Die Hard, which actually, that was another thing that Mark Bomback had written. Excuse me. So, and I think Total Recall, the remake of Total Recall, which was meh. But anyway, so, moving along. But this is something that Fox does. They will release the PG-13 film because everybody knows that PG-13 films make more money. Even though if this had been a hard R film, fans would flock to go see it, I guarantee you. This is not like Dredd from last year. I mean, Dredd, a lot of people still had bad feelings about, the Stallone Judge Dredd, and still not many people know who Judge Dredd even is. So, I mean, Judge Dredd was a brilliant failure, unfortunately. But still, there is hope alive to make a sequel to that, which would be awesome, because, anyway, off track. So with an experienced director at the helm, some really good screenwriters, and some terrific acting throughout, and as well as some really impressive action set pieces, this is a hell of a movie. This is not the Wolverine movie that we've been waiting for. We have been waiting for probably the Wolverine film that we've been waiting for. Both A, has yet to be made, and B, if it is the Wolverine film that we've been waiting for, it's the film that will be coming out to home video when this is eventually released, because that cut will be, according to what I've heard, will be an extended, unrated director's cut, and will be kind of more of an R-rated film. So, but, lack of, extreme bloodletting aside, this is still, the first act, sets up everything very, very smartly. The second act is very much about the relationship between Logan and Mariko, and the kind of, again, the machinations of everyone else around them. And then we have this, this bravura third act, which begins with what is easily the best scene in the film, which is a scene where Logan discovers exactly what is stopping his healing factor. And he has to get it out of him. And it leads through to this, this incredible fight scene that is just filled with, impact and emotion and everything like that. Everything that a good action sequence should have. Now, the final battle, which is when we actually meet the Silver Samurai, which is this hulking, almost robot, and almost seems to be a robot. That strangely is not piloted by Harada, who the comic fans will know as the Silver Samurai, is not in it. And there's a reason for that, which I won't spoil here. It's like I said. This is the pace for this film is kept up very well, and the moments that of the love story, for me, were some of the more interesting parts of the film, to be perfectly honest. I felt that it was very well done, that the love story was very deftly handled, and that it, just the way that the film was structured from beginning to end felt much more like this was something that had been created by Scott Frank rather than Mark Bombeck. This is, it's a cleverly constructed film, and there's some really good lines. There's some, like I said, some really terrific action sequences. You kind of wish that there had been more, and we also have to come to the inevitable. For those of us who, for those of you who watch my review videos, that if it has something to do with a comic book, that I'm going to have something to say about that, based on the comic book that this is based on a very, very famous limited series, and it's the way that they modify some of the characters. In some cases works, in some cases, I won't say it doesn't work, but it doesn't help. The characters, certain characters could stand to have a little bit more complexity to them. That was the only thing that I felt was a little off about the film, was that the characters, a lot of the characters seemed to get a little shafted. I felt that particularly Yukio, who is easily my favorite supporting character in the film, and just a great performance by that actress, I felt that she was a little bit shafted by just character development. We do know that she is apparently a mutant, or a little, at least she has a precognitive ability, is that she is able to see people's deaths. And that turns out to be true, even if it isn't. And that will make more sense when you see the film. The character, the characters of Harada, the character of Shingen are, I think they're a little two-dimensional. I think they could stand to be they could have stood to be a little bit more fleshed out. But this is, it's a film about Wolverine. The film is called The Wolverine. The film has to be about Logan, and it's about his journey. And it's one of the things that I found so refreshing about this film is that there is no real sense of bloat here. We've had, obviously we've had a couple of superhero films, big, huge budgeted films already this summer, that have, tremendous epic scale, or they'll have, just these kind of overwrought, sequences of, people falling out of planes, and just, throngs of zombies, or, giant robots, destroying cities, or, the last son of Krypton destroying everything. And it was nice to have something that was scaled back a little bit. It feels like this was probably maybe, comparatively speaking, this is probably about a $60 or $70 million film, as opposed to the $250 million epics that were Man of Steel or Iron Man 3. And this is definitely my favorite of the superhero films that have come out this summer, which is very surprising to me, because I didn't think that there was really going to be, I thought if any one title, if any one, character was going to do it for this summer, it would probably be Superman. But I should have known better. Well, to be perfectly honest, I thought it was Iron Man with Iron Man 3, but we all know that I didn't care for that film. I did like Man of Steel, kind of begrudgingly, but this film I absolutely really do enjoy. Like I said, I mean, there are just some logistical issues with it. The third act, the final battle in and of itself is a little bit. There are some moments where a little bit like, really? I mean, this has to be done like, there's all these, platforms and things, people falling, from one platform to another, and it just seems like we've kind of seen this before, and I was kind of wishing that there wasn't something like that in here. But and the explanation behind some of the baddies' plot is a little bit far-fetched, or just doesn't really make that much sense, and that could be due to them trying to maybe overcomplicate it, which is actually, that's better than trying to just make it, well, we want to do this because this, so I mean, I'd rather have it be a little bit more complicated than it just be kind of duh. So and of course, but the real hero here is the star of the film, which is Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman gives easily his best work as the character of Logan, James Howlett, Weapon X, whatever you want to call him. He brings, a swagger and a charm, and what is important to the film, which is one of the great things that it brings out of it, is that even when he is vulnerable, and even when he, isn't unkillable, he is still, you still get the sense this dude is really fucking dangerous. I mean, and he doesn't change his attitude, he just changes the way that he feels that he has to deal with, being vulnerable and being maybe killable. He brings a real sense of gravity to the character of Logan in this film, which is a gravity that we haven't seen before. I mean, we see him now. I mean, thankfully, there's no weeping in this film, as we saw in X3. I mean, he's fucking Wolverine. The guy doesn't cry ever, let alone 3 times in the same movie. Fuck you, Brett Ratner. And I'm still really angry about that film. Not really angry, but you know what I mean. I'm angry about it because it still should have been so much better than it was, and it wasn't. So we're almost at 30 minutes here, so I'm going to cut myself off. Anyway, very solid film, very well directed, well acted, well written. Could have tightened the screws a bit here and there. But overall, this is a very solid 4 out of 5, and definitely the best superhero movie of the summer, and of the year thus far. Not the best movie of the summer yet. That still belongs to Star Trek Into Darkness, but it's still a really good, really well-made film about the Wolverine. So That's it. If you like what you see, subscribe. Next time maybe we'll talk about The World's End. But more importantly, I'll be back to talk comics with you soon. I'm hoping that with The World's End, you'll see the wife again. But that's it. So, again, 4 out of 5, The Wolverine. Go see it. It's really good. You'll have a lot of fun. Take it easy, and we'll see you next time.